tropical storm possible off the coast of Florida on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for June 21st. We have the remnants of Alberto still traceable entering the eastern Pacific right now near the Baja California Peninsula, and apart from that there's two other areas of interest that we're watching closely in the Atlantic. Of course, the one that's just off the coast of Florida looking quite interesting this morning and could have a high chance of development later on today, although it is running very low on time. It's a small system, but a 50% chance on it right now, and that may be increased at the National Hurricane Center's update, which will be out literally as this goes out. But also a 70% chance that we've given for the area of interest that will be entering the Gulf of Mexico as well. So it looks like an Alberto Part 2 possibly on the way there. On day 38 of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season, apart from the remnants of Alberto, it's very quiet in the Eastern Pacific Basin, and it's expected to be like that again for some time yet. In the Western Pacific, we've actually dropped that area of interest that was lurking over the South China Sea. It looks like any development is being pushed further inland, and it won't be able to acquire a circulation, I expect, as we watch that system, as it may or may not even become an actual system to track. Now in the North Indian Ocean, there's really nothing much here either, but a lot of rainfall over this area at the moment. Lots of monsoonal type rainfall being pushed from east to west, and a lot of it over India as well. And in the Southwest Indian Ocean, for what it's worth, nothing much going on here at all. Very little activity across the whole southern Indian Ocean, and indeed across the southern hemisphere, because we are now well into the off-season. Excellent. Well, let's take a closer look at Invest 92L then. Here it is right now. It's 214 kilometers from Cape Canaveral, 220 from Daytona Beach, 240 from St. Augustine, 283 from Jacksonville, and 303 from Brunswick, Georgia. No watches or warnings out for this yet, at least in terms of tropical storm warnings or anything like that. They haven't called it a potential tropical cyclone in which they would be able to issue those warnings. And if it did develop into a tropical cyclone, there's no saying really that it would become a tropical storm anyway. It would probably stay as a depression. That's certainly what the models are expecting. So let's check it out on satellite imagery then, and in contrast to what we had with Alberto being very large, this system is actually on the opposite end, a very small system with just one real cell of convection there holding it up. Looks like when you watch that convection that it's moving towards maybe the southwest, but in fact the circulation, if there is one, is actually still moving in a northwesterly direction and is now entering that little gap in between all of that area in those first visible images that we're now looking at on this system. So further movement will probably be towards the northwest, landfall probably in Georgia, although it could still steer one or the other direction in those late hours before that landfall, which will probably occur later today the way it's going right now. You can just see its movement in the last few hours getting closer and closer to land already. A little bit of rainfall in association with this system already reaching the coast of Florida, and you'll be feeling it in Georgia a little bit later on as that radar imagery has been showing. There's a nice close-up imagery there of that region where this system is right now, and it really does look quite messy. It doesn't look like it's got a developed circulation at all, and that's what they have been unable to find so far in the recon planes. Look at the wide shot and just how small the system actually is, and you can take a look at the area where Alberto formed as well, and we're starting to see a little bit of rumblings going on there too, a little bit of rotation here and there, but nothing too much that's organized yet. Eastern Atlantic looks very bare right now, and huge amounts of Saharan dust being flung up into the Eastern Atlantic. Looking at the Eastern Pacific, you can see what's left of Alberto on the top left there, moving through the southern part of Baja California, and some thunderstorms south of Mexico as well that aren't going to become anything. And in the Western Pacific, we're looking at a few little things here and there. The Philippines getting quite a bit of a drenching right now, especially further west, and a little system out over the far east there. And in the Indian Ocean, you can see just how busy it is right now, with thunderstorms everywhere, monsoonal rains all over the Indian region, Bangladesh and Indochina. And looking at the Arabian Sea, it's calm further north, but to the southeast there, the continuation of those monsoonal showers being pushed towards the west there as well. There's a brief look at rainfall, satellite imagery rainfall estimates there for Invest 92L, and there's the Atlantic shear map right now, showing the system moving through that area too. Light wind shear for it right now, so it's looking pretty good. Eastern Pacific, and looking at the Gulf of Mexico there as well, it's going to be half and half for the Gulf. Eastern Pacific got high wind shear right now in that main area of development, and in the Western Pacific it's looking pretty decent in those lower latitudes in terms of what we're seeing there, low wind shear amounts. Sea surface temperatures looking good and getting better in the Eastern Pacific and extending further up the Gulf of California, but off the coast of southern Mexico those temperatures reaching 30 degrees plus. Gulf of Mexico also looking good even after Alberto, especially further south and west. Gulf Stream looking good as well, helping Invest 92L, 28 to 29 degrees Celsius waters. Real hotspot east of Puerto Rico as well through the Lesser Antilles, temperatures over 30 degrees. Western Pacific, we're looking at very high sea surface temperatures all around the Philippines and stretching up to Taiwan and down Micronesian islands as well, up to and above 30 degrees Celsius is a general theme. And in the North Indian Ocean, we've still got a few hot spots there as well, especially in the Arabian Sea where temperatures are pushing close to 32. We won't be showing the Southern Hemisphere anymore because it's not very relevant, so we're looking at the anomalies now. Very much above average in the Atlantic still, in all of the areas that matter, up to 3 or 4 degrees above average in 1 or 2 spots. Eastern Pacific only slightly above average and cooler in the higher latitudes, and in the Western Pacific it's looking pretty good there as well, 2 to 3 degrees above the normal. Bay of Bengal quite close to normal actually right now, but the Arabian Sea also above average. Oceanic heat content has actually fallen in the eastern part of the East Pacific. It's really quite low now. I'm not really sure why. Maybe just because of all of that, those showers that have been occurring in that area. Western Pacific, though, really building up huge amounts of energy there in the Philippine Sea, especially. Really waiting for some storms to take advantage of that. The Atlantic also looking pretty similar to what we've been seeing in the last few weeks. A line there, really a curved line of high energy areas from the Lesser Antilles through southern Hispaniola, Jamaica, western Cuba and into the Gulf of Mexico. Checking the GFS computer model, you can see very quickly Invest 92L makes landfall, and also very quickly this system developing in the Gulf of Mexico, moving off towards the west, forming quite quickly with some strong winds there at first, but it actually weakens later on as it stalls off the coast near Tampico once again, which is where Alberto made landfall, but still looking at a decent chance of formation here, and a few different model scenarios taking it anywhere from the border with Texas down further south towards Veracruz. But really pretty set in stone what's going to happen to this one in terms of track. It's whether it manages to become a tropical cyclone or not, which was another question mark we had with Alberto. Of course, it won't be quite as large, but will still be quite broad, and it will be delivering once again quite a bit of rainfall to these areas. Even on the Yucatan as well into Belize, we're looking at significant amounts of rain over the next 7 days, some of it from this disturbance, and again up towards 10 inches of rainfall there in parts of Tamaulipas, Mexico, and further south into neighboring states, and possibly creeping into Nuevo Leon as well. Up in Florida and Georgia, rainfall amounts aren't going to be very high, up towards 2 inches from Invest 92L. Now looking at the Western Pacific in the medium range, day 5 to 10, it's picking up on a new system actually in the Philippine Sea, developing into a substantial tropical cyclone and then becoming a small typhoon in the South China Sea, heading towards the coast of southeastern China towards the end of that 10-day period. Certainly could happen, but we'll have to wait for it to get a little bit closer to the forecast period before we start giving chances on this potential system. And we know what the GFS is like. It can take away these systems just as quickly as it develops them on their model runs. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all our products as well as our still waiting for Hone t-shirt and full season and individual storm animations on request. Entering the Scilly Range, day 10 to 16, we have the landfall of that typhoon, and actually nothing else really anywhere around the world in that period. So Eastern Pacific fans, you're going to be desperately disappointed to see that there's nothing expected in the next 16 days. There is a small low pressure system that could develop though a little bit later on that we haven't shown, but unlikely. And apart from this Western Pacific system, it's going to be all quiet again in the first week of July, which would be really fascinating just how quiet the start of this Northern Hemisphere season has been. But that's a significant landfall there for China if that does occur. On this day, a much bigger beast. It was Typhoon Fengshen, which was moving through the Philippine Islands on this day in 2008. It peaked as a strong Category 3 storm as it was moving through the islands. It was just off the coast of Mindoro at this point in time when it reached its peak intensity at 125 mph winds, and then it started off towards the northwest later on there out over the South China Sea where it weakened. That's a good picture of Fengshen there. I assume that's near its peak intensity. I'm not actually sure. So we are code blue for Invest 92L, mainly because of how close it is to land, or actually I think it was actually for the other system. I beg my pardon on that one. But the next name in the Atlantic is Beryl, and that certainly would become code blue for 92L if it did develop. In the Eastern Pacific, the next name is Aletta, and in the Central Pacific, it's still Hone. In the Western Pacific, next up is Gamey, and in North Indian Ocean, it's Asna. 21 storms so far this year were 35% below the average, which is really pretty poor, it has to be said. But you can never let your guard down, and things could get very spicy later on in the year. Robin is next in the Australian region. Southwest Indian Ocean is Jeremy if it forms in the next week or so, and in the South Pacific the next name is Pitta. That's all from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow.
Become an ultimate fan today.